Stacy, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
I'm excited to chat with you again. I know we've been fortunate to catch up in real life here in Raleigh, so it's good to have you on the podcast and talk through some of the things you've been doing, which I think are so valuable for people with their business. I think they get overlooked a lot of like why people don't succeed. Well, a lot of it comes down to their brand messaging, their copywriting, those type of things. So your talent is welcomed and needed in our world. So.
Well, I love talking about it, so I'm excited to get into it today.
Well, I thought we'd start, just being the Just Get Started podcast and looking at the journeys of all the different guests I've had. It's such a wide range, right? Why people start, why they're doing today, what maybe they weren't doing 5 or 10 years ago. And I think really interesting, we're at a point now with you where you can share, just recently you decided to leave your job for good and go full time into your business. And I'm kind of curious if you can share a little bit of the insight and maybe the plan behind leaving, because I know a lot of folks struggle with that. They want to leave maybe corporate job or they want to do something different. And they think, oh, I have to quit and then do something instead of building something behind the scenes until they're ready. Can you share just a little bit about that? We'll take it where you want, and then we'll dive a little deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had been teaching for a long time, and I had been looking for other career options for a while, and just nothing seemed like it was a good fit. And so I'd sort of resigned myself to the fact that I'm just going to be, in education forever. It is what it is. And really didn't think I had any other choices. Everything seemed to be so out of reach because I either needed to go back to school. I know that's a big barrier for a lot of people looking to make a shift, right? Or it was going to mean that I needed to take a pay cut. And that also was not an option for me. So I was sitting on the couch one night and I'm randomly just scrolling on Facebook and I came across an ad for a copywriting course. Had no clue what copywriting was before that. And I clicked on it and I looked at my husband. I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going to be a copywriter. And he used to be in graphic design and web development, and all that. So he knew exactly what it was. And he was like, yeah, you'd probably be great at that. You should do it. And so I used to say it sort of accidentally happened, right? But what I realize, especially the longer I'm in copywriting, is it just is a showcase of the power of copywriting. It was the exact right message to the exact right person at the exact right time. And that really just changed my life. But I knew wasn't going to be, making 10K in a month or anything like that. And so I had to gradually ease my way into my business. So I just started off with kind of some research, figuring out what's copywriting, what does it entail, what do I need to learn and do so I can start my business. And I started really slowly growing this on the evenings and weekends and, fitting in the time that I could. And after about a year, I was able to go part-time in my job and then just work part-time copywriting, and super fortunate. My business grew faster than I anticipated. And before I knew it, I was working at copywriting at my business full-time, but I was still teaching part-time. And I had a lot of people still encouraging me like, oh, well, you should just quit teaching now. But I knew that for me, I wanted to have a solid plan in place, right? I wanted to launch this knowing that I was going to be able to sustain the business and not be stressed out. I needed to replace my income. I did that. And I also was able to get a lot of mistakes out of the way while I was still in that process of growing. And I think those would have been a lot scarier had I not had some kind of safety net.
I want to go all the way back to what you said about the course. It pops up because I actually find this is where a lot of people struggle. They get excited. Oh, I'm going to do this course. And then like they finished, 12% of it, you look back a year and they didn't do anything. When you reflect back on that, do you know why you went through with it? Like, why did you continue?
So the funny thing is I actually never took the course.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. There you go.
Which is always the part I'm like, I honestly don't even remember what ad the course was for. I wish I did because I owe them everything. But I just sort of started down this rabbit hole of what is copywriting. And I didn't want to, there were so many courses out there. I was sort of in that like paralysis stage, right? Of like, well, what do I choose? So actually the first thing that I did is I went on my local Buy Nothing group and I said, are there any copywriters in the group? I would love to pick your brain. And 2 women responded and they both graciously got on calls with me. And they were able to sort of, talk to me about really what it entailed. They gave me some great suggestions about places I wanted to start looking. Um, and then, I just sort of started doing the research from there.
Mm.
I did end up taking a different course after the fact, but yeah, it was sort of this. I wanted to make sure that I was not jumping in without being strategic about it.
Do you think, and where I'm trying to go with this, 'cause I'm really curious, is do you think it was out of frustration of not wanting to be at your job anymore, or was that more of the excitement of something new to distract you from the job? You know what I'm saying? Like, do you know where I'm getting at with that?
Yeah, so it was sort of both. I definitely had been disenchanted for a while with my job. I had a couple of corporate offers, and then I felt like I was just going to be trading one thing that was not fulfilling me anymore for something else that was unfulfilling. And so I knew that if I was going to leave education, it had to be for something that was going to just really fulfill me, something I would be passionate about. And I didn't know anything existed that wasn't going to require me gaining an entire new skill set, or like I said, just taking this gigantic pay cut. So yes, I was kind of desperate to get out of it, but I wasn't going to just take the leap for something unless I knew it was going to be something that win or fail, it was going to be a good experience for me. And so once I really started, I think like a lot of people, I thought, copywriting was writing. And writing is very little bit of what I actually do. Most of what I really do is research. And I'm an avid reader. I'm always curious, love to learn about new things. So it was like this perfect mix of it's sort of this escape route, but I have the skills and knowledge. And I think this would be really fun and something I would enjoy doing. And so if it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have gone this path.
How did you get your first client?
So actually my first three clients, I know people say don't work for free. I worked for free with my first few clients. So I just reached out to people I knew who were business owners that I thought the arrangement could be mutually beneficial. I said, hey, I'm getting into copywriting. I'd love to support you and do a project for free in exchange for your feedback. And if you're happy with the value, a testimonial. And so that's what I did. So I did social media for a local travel agent. I did a landing page and I did a website for clients, three of them. And I just worked my way through figuring it out. And yeah, that's how I did it. And then once I went through those first three projects, I figured out my process. What does it look like to onboard, right? What's working, what's not working, got their feedback, and then I felt confident enough. My first paying client, it's funny, I'm not really on Facebook, but it keeps coming up. My first paying client came from Facebook. I posted that, I've started this copywriting business. If you happen to know anybody, my husband's friend saw it and she said, I have a friend who needs a copywriter. Can I connect you? Connected us via Messenger, and I had a contract in a week.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's yeah, it's insane how that works out. And going back to your point on the kind of free versus paid, I know that's kind of a depending on who you talk to. I'm in the camp of free work early on, especially because to your point, I think the testimonials are massive and you do get that experience that you wouldn't think about. So the things that you messed up on probably you maybe don't do that when someone's actually trying to pay for you or you're in a competitive situation, they're looking at multiple vendors or whatever. Now you at least have your ducks in a row, right?
Exactly. And I was able to say to them, right, it was very transparent the entire time that this is what I'm figuring out. So it took a lot of pressure off for me. And I definitely think that my first few projects probably would have been more of a struggle had I not gone that route.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that confidence of, charging whatever you can charge, someone might be like, I'm not going to do this. Or what happens more times than not, I see is the over analytical side of, okay, let me take 6 more months to bake all of this stuff out, get more experience, whatever it is, and then look for clients instead of like doing it in the now. And I think that's where we grow the most anyways,
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, I'm sort of fortunate in the fact that my career was in education because there's this school year. And so that timeline was really helpful to me because I had this idea that, like, okay, what I want is by this time, by the next school year. And so I figured out what do I need to make to replace my income? And I set goals along the way. And so I knew in order to achieve that, it was kind of like, well, I have to get started because if I don't get started now,
Yeah.
then I'm not going to be able to meet this first goal and then the second goal. And so, really just setting these goals that I wasn't hard and fast about. If I didn't meet a goal, it would have been okay. I would have pivoted or figured out and learned, but it gave me these benchmarks, and that was really helpful to have.
Speaking of clients, and this maybe this will sidetrack us or get us on a new path here. What problem typically does someone come to you for? Like, what's the biggest problem you're hearing on like discovery calls or what have you?
Yeah. So most of my clients come to me initially for websites. They're struggling because they're not getting enough qualified leads through their websites, right? Or they're not getting any leads at all. People are coming to their sites. And generally, what they've said is they put their website up because they wanted to look legit, right? And it was a place to store information. And now they've realized that, oh, okay, I actually need this website to do a job for me, and it's not doing its job. Or they're embarrassed to give out their business card, right? Because it's got the website URL. So that's often what they come to me is worried about the copy on their website. But when we have our discovery calls, what we usually uncover is it's actually a messaging issue. And so the difference between messaging and copywriting is your brand messaging is the foundation of your marketing messaging, right? It's what's the key messaging that my client needs to hear so I can connect with them. And then the copywriting is now how do I write that in a way that's going to convert into leads or sales? And so a lot of times we have to go back to sort of the basics. They know the demographics of their target audience, but they don't really know like what keeps them up at night or what triggers them to buy. And so we usually end up kind of going down that rabbit hole first before we work on their websites.
There's a lot, I imagine, like they're trying to solve a symptom. Oh, my website, and they
Yep.
realize no, there's a massive problem here that you don't even realize you have.
Yes. And a lot of people I've talked to who weren't even originally necessarily looking for copywriting, they're just, people I meet in networking or at events, and they struggle with lead generation or they've got these sales funnels, right? They're doing all this networking and they're doing all of the right things, but they're doing it without that foundation of knowing like what sets them apart from their competitors, how to articulate their unique value. And then that's often how I get people like, oh, I think I might need your help with some brand messaging strategy. And so it's funny, a lot of times my clients come to me not even they weren't looking for the solution at all that they knew that I offered. They were looking for other solutions, right? How do I build a funnel? Things like that.
Yeah. What are some of the common mistakes if you're looking at, let's say, someone's website or someone's brand copy or whatever it is? What are some of the common mistakes you see most often with
Ooh,
some,
yeah, there are a few. I would say the biggest thing is, well, there's quite a few. One is right. We have this tendency we talk about our businesses in the way we know and understand and talk about our businesses, not in the way that our clients do. And so you might often hear people saying, talk like speak in the language of your customer. And what that means is if you think back to when you first started your business and all the jargon, I remember there were times when I started copywriting and I was like, somebody just explain this to me like I'm 5. What does this mean? What's this acronym? Not because I was dumb, because I didn't know, right? That wasn't my wheelhouse. And so we forget as business owners so many times we're in the thick of it and we don't talk about our clients' problems the way our clients talk about their problems. And so we tend to make our websites all about us, 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 and what we offer and why we're so great. And really, your client doesn't care about that, right? They go on your website and they want to know what's in it for me. How is this going to improve my life? So I think, being focused on ourselves and on kind of the features of what we offer, not on how it's going to change or impact our lives, how we can solve their problem and make their lives better. So that's the first one. And I would say the other one, gosh, there's so many. I'm not even sure where to go next.
what's one where it should be eye opening or not even that? It should be glaring, and they just miss. It goes right over people's head. When you see it, you're like, and they're like, oh, smack my head. I should have known that.
Oh gosh. I think I do. I think a lot of that is just talking about yourself. So I would say the other thing, this is sort of a roundabout answer to your
All
question.
right.
Um, but something that I come across a lot when I'm working with my clients is one of the things I always do is competitor research. So I ask them to give me like the 3 websites of their direct competitors, and then just some industries for their indirect competitors. And I was actually working with a client one time. She's local, she's a coach, and I was doing her competitor research. And I kept getting confused because I was like, how do I keep clicking on the same site? So I finally pulled up her competitors' 3 sites, one next to each other. They were almost identical, not even in how they looked, but in how they sounded. And they were it felt like so generic. I literally could have taken anybody's name off that website and put in anybody else's.
Mhm.
And there was nothing to differentiate them, right? So we think we know what sets us apart. We understand why we might have an edge on our competitor, and we think it's obvious to other people, but they don't know. And so I think that that's the biggest thing, the biggest opportunity people miss on their website is very, very clearly and concisely just letting people know what you do, why it matters to them, and why they should choose you. We tend to tell them way more than they need to know.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, it's funny because I'm going through this literally right now. Like I'm in this, I've been doing the podcast for almost 7 years now, and it's evolved to, building a business around it and doing coaching, all these other stuff. And so I'm in this period right now, like redeveloping the website and think of my brand voice. So like, you're like speaking to me here. Cause I'm like, yeah, I've been kind of this whole idea of, I've been the hero in the story and I need to let the customer be the hero. And I'm the guy
Exactly.
like that kind of, and I had it backwards, not thinking anything about it. So yeah, you're kind of speaking to me because, that's the challenge I've had is like, I think the messaging has been kind of clouded and people don't really know what they're getting when they engage with Brian. So I'm assuming that's a common thing then. Yeah. Other folks are having as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever I go through a client's website before we do a rewrite, I'll do that before our first discovery call. And sometimes I get on the call and I'm like, I'm really still not clear on what you do.
Yeah.
And that's we dig through everything on their website. And the thing you have to remember is nobody's reading every word of your website except for you and your copywriter, right? Like maybe your mom, but for the most part, most people aren't reading every single word on your website. So it needs to be really easy for them to navigate, to skim, to scan, to find the information that they need. And I think that that's another common mistake is let's tell them everything. Let's give them all the information they could ever need and all of the possible choices. And we end up just overwhelming and confusing people when we do that.
How do you encourage people when, in terms of starting to think about, and we'll use the phrasing and correct me, use something different if it's better, like their brand voice, right? Because I think that's one of the things that challenge people. It's like, oh, I have this business and I'm going to talk about this product. But in reality, you don't want to just talk about the product all day, every day. It's kind of this larger kind of, I guess, this larger thing that they should be thinking about. I guess, how do those conversations go in terms of getting someone to think not just about a point solution product versus you're the brand, you're the business, the humans behind it. How does that
Yeah,
conversation start?
absolutely. Well, and I think this also depends on the type of business you own, right? Like there's no hard and fast rules for anything in my opinion, but especially when it comes to this, if I'm a solopreneur and I am the face of my
Mhm.
business, then I'm going to approach that a little bit differently than if I'm a business that has salespeople and other people that are also going to be, the
Right.
face of the business. So I would say thinking about sort of a personal brand first. Whatever you do, the most important thing is it has to be consistent, right? And so however you present yourself
Mm.
when you're on a call, when you're engaging with clients, that should be how you're also presenting yourself, whether it's on your website, social media, in an email. I actually have clients often get on calls with me and they're like, oh my gosh, you're exactly like what I expected. And they seem surprised by it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I have to be because I am, the person behind my brand. And so the keys to that is it has to be genuine to how you're going to engage and interact with your customers, but it also has to resonate with them, right? If you want to be bold or edgy or something, that's fine if that's how you are going to engage and also what your clients want in their solution. And so that's a mistake I see with brand voice a lot is people are going to just say, okay, this is my brand voice, this is how I want to come across, and they don't do the research to see, is this going to be what resonates with my clients as well? There has to be that balance.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to bigger brands, right, and there's going to be, you have to have consistency both internally and externally with how you talk about your brand. And so I think it's more important to focus on customer research from that point, and also your competitors. You know, you don't want to blend in. And so a lot of people will go, oh, well, this competitor has this brand voice and they're doing really well. Let's emulate that. But all you're doing is blending in instead of setting yourself apart. So, you know, it just goes back to so much research on what are people doing? What's the thing you need to do to be competitive? And then where's the gap? What's the edge that you have that can make you stand out and be different?
Yeah. You mentioned about the getting on a call. I remember, I mean, this is all comes up a lot from a sales side. Is like people will be like totally different, very buttoned up and salesy and all this stuff, and then they're totally and it's like, why don't you just be yourself? It's so much easier. You don't have to lie. You know, you don't have to be dishonest, because that's really, I think it comes across as dishonest. Like it's hard to trust someone where I'm like, yeah, I saw you differently last week when, you know, whatever. Now you're being so like, who are you going to show up as? It's almost as Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing.
Absolutely. And it's so important. I mean, you have to build trust and you have to build rapport. And there's the, you know, no like trust is a thing. And so people, they get to know you. And if you're showing up differently every time, if that was a personal relationship, that wouldn't be one you'd buy into. And, you know, people need to realize it's just a business relationship. And so I think sometimes we forget, especially if we're talking about website copy or social media, because we're behind a screen, like there's a human on the other side of that screen.
Right.
Also, and they're formulating their opinions and their ideas about you. And so, you know, consistency is or lack of consistency is probably the easiest way to lose clients.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier on about, you know, the clients will come to you because they're not getting enough lead conversion, or at what point is there, let's take this from like an analytics side, or you can kind of direct it somewhere else, but like, how do you know if that's like whatever conversion they're asking for is even achievable, but also where they're starting is even good? Like, oh, that's actually really good, or it's not. Like, are there any things you should be looking at? Like when you look at data and analytics for a website, you know, okay, this is piss poor, or this is actually pretty good, but we could improve. How do you disseminate those different numbers?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a loaded question with a lot of different answers. So I would say first, I think the important thing is, you know, if people are not getting to your site at all, then it's not an issue with the copy on your website. You've got, you know, that's we need to look at some other things within your marketing.
Mm-hmm.
But if people are coming to your website and they're coming to your homepage and then they're just bouncing before they're going anywhere else, you know, the first place to look is then, well, then let's take a peek at your homepage. You know, and let's see, I'll ask clients, and this is often the most eye-opening thing. I'll say, well, what's the main goal of your website, right? When somebody comes to your website, what is it that you want them to do? And they'll usually go, I never thought about that, right? Like there's all these things they could do, but what's that one thing? And then is that clear on your website? If what you want them to do is subscribe to your email list, then your call to action at the top button should be subscribing to your email list, right? Your first call to action in your hero section, the part that you see above before you scroll, then that should probably be subscribing to your email list.
Right.
So making sure that, you know, they know what the goal of their page is, and then making it easy to navigate. So like, let me back up a little bit. So, you know, that's one thing that happens is they go to your homepage and then they bounce, they don't go anywhere else. So then we can look at the messaging on the homepage to see, is that the issue? The bigger problem a lot of times is when they're on your site for 2 or 3 minutes and they've navigated to multiple pages, you probably have a copy issue. Also, where you're not directing people in the right way to understand, like it's not clear what you do. I've been on websites before where I was on one this morning actually looking for a service I need, and I could not find the information that I needed. I was so confused. And I ended up probably on the site for 4 to 5 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
but the messaging was so unclear. I left, and I don't even, you know, I won't go back to that site again. And I didn't even reach out. So it's sort of this, you know, time on page is sort of indicative of conversions, but not always. When clients ask about, I don't know if where you're headed is sort of like, ROI or increasing conversion, that's something I'm really hesitant to ever guarantee, because generally when people come to me, multiple things are happening. They probably also have a new web designer, right? Or they might be redesigning the site. That's going to impact your analytics.
Mhm.
But also, a lot of my clients come to me because they're making some sort of pivot. Either they're rebranding, or they're in a growing and scaling phase, or they have a new service or a new offer. So there's so many external factors that are taking part that you can't, it's hard to say, I can give you this ROI on this specific website just by rewriting the copy. Does that make
Oh
sense?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That is the hard, because it's like a science experiment, right? You have a control, but there's all these variables, and sometimes it's hard to know which is which and which is actually affecting the bottom line. If
Yes.
you know.
Yeah, I had a client who I did her copy, and she put it into her website, and actually initially the analytics went down on her website.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my, went back and looked through, and I talked to her about, like, I think, have you thought about just consulting with a web designer? She did, had a web designer end up redesigning the site, and her analytics like shot up because there's such this important cohesion between copy and design, right? And so we try to DIY things, and I've done that before too. You have to, as a business owner,
Mhm.
DIY some things at some points, right? But if you don't have cohesive copy and design, then that could be a really big impact. Like, I was looking at your website earlier, and I love the picture that you have in your hero section, right? Really speaks to what I think the main goal of your website, I'm going to guess, is to get people on your podcast or engage with your podcast. Um, if not,
Well,
we can
no,
chat about that.
it's funny you bring that up, like that. Well, that's why the website has it today, right? And in or end of September here, 2024, because it's going to change over the next handful of months. Because that was the issue I was finding, is like like, what, to your question, I love it. It's like, yeah, what's the goal of the website? And it used to always be, well, the podcast, and like that's what and now I look at it as like, no, I'm trying to build a business around coaching, and then build the blog up more. And the podcast is still important, but there's these other avenues and levers. And I felt like, okay, the message is getting lost here, right? So
Yes.
that's kind of where yeah. So it's funny you picked that up, because I look at my site now and I cringe. I'm like, oh, I could be so much better, and that's why I'm making this whole change, because I'm like, what is that? I feel exactly what you mentioned. I think a lot of people feel that pain. It's like, why is it not converting? Oh, because my messaging is probably not exact to where I want them to go. And ultimately that throws a loop, and a monkey wrench, if you will, into my business growth.
Exactly. And as you change services, right? I mean, it's hard to figure out when to take certain services off or certain offers off and put other ones on. And then what really needs to be on your website and where it needs to be on your website, because there are so many things that, if you have multiple services, that's okay. But do they each get their own page? Do you need sub pages? What's mentioned where? And then what detracts and confuses people, because, hey, maybe this is the place for this isn't on my website. And so there's just so many factors to consider.
Yeah, it's tough, because especially to your point, like if you're a business owner, you're focusing on one or a couple products or something, you're not thinking about the copy potentially, or the message all the time, or how does this page, if someone clicks here, it does this. And I think there's a struggle because it seems like very overwhelming, that there's so much I have to do. And then, okay, what's working? It's not just changing one link and all of a sudden. Now, maybe you could see an uptick, but it's probably a continual effort, right? Whatever, I guess you can say, sharpen the saw, if you will, and just make it right.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you have to see what works and make adjustments. And I think, you asked earlier about common mistakes I see with business owners. And I think sometimes we don't give it enough of a chance either, right? We put up the new website, or we have something, and we just start messing with everything. And so you have to be strategic as you make adjustments to your website too. When you're thinking about, okay, let me just change. I had one client, actually, I love this story, who hired me because, well, wanted to hire me to rewrite the entire website. Looked at the website, and I was like, I think your website is actually really solid, but your call to action buttons are either just non existent, or they're unclear, or they're just like blending in. Literally all we did was I had a consultation call with them. All we did was added more call to action buttons throughout and changed the language on them. And it was almost an instant increase in
Yeah.
conversions. And so it's it's so tricky. It's whatever part of your business that you do well, is what you want to focus on. And all of this stuff seems external, but it inhibits you from being able to grow in your business if you don't have the copy set up to convert, whether that's your website or emails or
Yeah.
blogs.
So obviously there's someone that's been in business for 10 years, they're struggling, whatever. And to your point, they're going to come to you and you might be like, well, the website, we can just tweak here, this here. Let's talk about someone that's fresh. They're thinking of starting a business or they're just starting. If you had to give them the 2 to 4 steps of like because some folks want to jump and be like, oh, I'm going to get a cool website or I'm going to get these
Yep.
business cards or whatever it is. And it's like, well, hold on, let's take a step back. So what would you say if you had to kind of put in order, these are what I would encourage you to do as steps to get your brand voice, your messaging in order? How would you encourage them?
So I think the foundation of it all is starting with mission, vision, values,
Okay.
right? What's the goal? Why are you doing and how are you going to do that? And then your values should really be the non-negotiables in your business for how you're going to run and engage in your business. They become kind of your North Star, right? I think it's really important to look at who else is out there doing what you're doing, what are they offering, and starting to figure out sort of how you position yourself. That being said, when you're a startup, right, sometimes it's messy and you just have to get started with whatever your messaging is and figure out what it sounds like. I loved actually I listened to the episode you did with Alex Catoni.
Oh yeah.
And I love where she was talking about in there how like her mission statement about de-douchifying the internet like
Right.
came up accidentally when she was teaching, right? And it's about just getting out there and getting started with your messaging and seeing what connects with
Yeah.
people. What's the language that's resonating, and how are your clients talking about their problems? And just get started. You don't need a website right away. Now I will say there are exceptions to that, right? Definitely, I'm a website copywriter. I needed a website when I started. But you don't always need a website right when you start, and you definitely don't need a full website. That holds so many people back, and there's multiple reasons for that. One is you're going to change and evolve. Your business is going to grow so much in that first year, especially. You're likely going to just have a different target audience, or you're going to pivot, you're going to grow, your offers may change or be different, and you're going to have so much more experience that you're going to make changes. You don't want to do this big, huge upfront investment, right? Um, the other thing I would say is just be obsessed with your clients. It really is. When you said your clients are your hero, are the hero in your
Mhm.
story, they really are, right? They have a problem. You have a solution to their problem. You owe it to them to help them understand what that solution is and how you can help them. And the way you do that is just by knowing everything there is to know about them. I record every call I have with every single client, and I'm constantly going back in and digging into the language that they use, um, and just trying to get in their heads all the time so that I am able to, connect with them to help them see, I do see and understand this problem and the way that it's showing up in your life. And here's how I can help you change and adjust that. So all of that to say, I would start by really get obsessed with your clients, right? Get started, put up a one-page website, do the best you can with it. I always think it's a good investment if you are able to have a web designer or a copywriter, to start. But if you can't, just get something up there. It's better than not starting. And just really take stock in, do you need a website? If the competitors in your space don't have one, you probably don't need one either. If they don't all have, if you can get clients without it, then that's okay. So it's just sort of take the pressure off yourself to feel like you have to have it perfect.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing I would say is be careful with who you're comparing yourself to. Right. When I first started, I was looking at websites of copywriters that were years ahead of me. And that wasn't a relevant measurement for me
Right.
to look at. And so really find the people who are in the space, in the same space where you are, and just make yourself competitive with them.
Yeah. Quick question going back, because I love the one page website because it is kind of a bridge to get you going. And I think the challenge, we talked about this earlier, we could make a million, to-do list items of like, oh, I can't get started until I do X, Y, and Z. And the reality is you can start today. The website can come later. But I do like the one page. Is there a and I know there's a million different ones out there, but one or two that you've used or that you recommend to clients to use, like a website builder that's easy to set up for one page?
So I'm going to say that depends on a lot of factors. One is one's your industry, right? One's if you're so there are some things. I just did a sales page for a cohort that I'm starting, and I actually built that in Canva.
Hmm.
Um, there are lots of things where you can start like that, but some of it depends. If you're a local business, local SEO is going to be important to you. You're probably better off investing in a platform like WordPress or something like that. But I think it just depends on your capabilities. So there are sites like Squarespace that are very easy for people to set up and use. But the problem with those often is they're very limited. Like I can look at sites now and I know it was what a Squarespace site looks like, right?
Yeah.
And even though your clients won't look at it and be like, oh, that's a Squarespace site, it just feels a little more I guess a little more basic, right? Which is fine, but are you going to do the work yourself? Do you need someone to help you? Most of the web designers I partner with will recommend WordPress,
Yeah.
but I would never recommend WordPress unless you had the skill set to, create and upkeep your website on your own. So um, I think it really depends on so much as far as budget, comfort level, expertise, industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I underscore the WordPress. My site's been on WordPress for, a dozen plus years, and you have to know what you're doing because it can get complex back there. A lot of cool stuff you can
Yes.
do, but actually one that's coming to mind now that I know has been recommended a ton is Card, I think it's CARRD. I think that's easy to jump into and get started. I did see Canva with your course. Yeah. I didn't know Canva, you could do a site in there.
Oh, it was so easy. It was so, yeah, you could just do the site and you can just, fill it out, publish it, and then you can link it to your own domain and everything as well.
Hmm.
So mine with my sales page actually still has the Canva up, but I could have totally linked that to my domain as well. So it looks like it's coming directly, just as a landing page or something. And so, yeah, it has a lot of great capabilities. And I know that that's one that is pretty easy to utilize and it can look professional. It can be a good starting site for sure. And especially if your goal is, like most new business owners, you need a website to look legit, whether that's just your own opinion and your own thing, your own thing that's holding you back, or sometimes, people are going to, oh, they don't have a website. They're not legit. So Canva's a great tool for something like that if that's your goal. But if your goal is SEO and those types of things, then you're probably better off with something like WordPress. On my site's on Show It.
Okay. Well, it goes back. I mean, and what's fun about these conversations when it actually it circles back to how we started, like you don't need technically a website. You got your first client by, making a Facebook message. And so I think that's the one thing, if like folks really look at their network, people close to them, hey, I'm doing this. And it's amazing how many people want to support you. Not always, but there are a lot of people that do. And then they might make a suggestion or what have you. And that all of a sudden gets that first client or two in the door. You may not need a website at all.
Yeah. In my case, definitely, I know that the people that were referred to me, they did go right to my website. But I think it's because I'm a website copywriter,
Yeah.
right? So the
Fair.
expectation
Yeah.
is um, I'm going to have a website. But yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of business owners that I've worked with that they've been in business for a little while and they haven't had a website and they're ready to grow. And they're at that phase where, okay, I need the website now in order to kind of move to the next level in my business. But they're able, especially if you're active on platforms like LinkedIn, or you do a lot of networking. Most of my clients come to me through networking or referrals. They do all go to my website for sure. But generally, they go there after that referral. And that's the other important thing to keep in mind is it's really important when people are going to your website. So most people that go to my website are in decision-making stage.
Mm-hmm.
They already know about me. They've already considered their options. They've narrowed it down to maybe one or two copywriters. So when they get to my site, they're going to look at it very differently than somebody else who's like, oh, hey, I need a website. Should I consider doing it myself? Should I consider AI? Do I need a copywriter? What are my other options? And so that's another what's the intent of the person landing on your website? That's important to know.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing, and you mentioned this, like with the not comparing yourself to these others that are way ahead potentially, there, we get caught in this loop of thinking like the world's so small and like, oh, everyone's grabbing for business. There's plenty of business out there. So people, that's why I think using your network, people want to do business with, who they like, trust, and respect. So even if it's a mutual connection and they refer you in, I had a couple of clients I'm working with, I do a lot of coaching with founder-led sales and, helping them. And the couple I had this year were referrals, because it's like, okay, I know Brian, or I know someone that knows Brian, got a recommendation in and had a great time working with them, not because I had some grandiose website or I had all this great copy or whatever it was. So I think that's, to your point earlier, it's like we get so overwhelmed with all the stuff we can do, instead of just saying, I'm going to take the first step. It might be messy, but at least I'm moving the ball down the field. And that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's so true. I recently had the opportunity I was at a summit a couple weeks ago, and Jerry McNamara was there, who does a lot of coaching. And he said, and I've on my sticky note on the bulletin board right in front of me, and he was like, win ugly.
Yeah.
I wrote it down. I was like, I love that. And he's like, you don't have a CRM? All right, write it down write it on sticky notes. You don't have your website yet? Just, win ugly, just do it. And that to me it's not about, getting the perfect website. We just use that as a form of, procrastination, perfectionism. And so, of course, I do think, websites are important, and they can certainly increase your conversions. But when you're talking about that just get started phase, don't let it be something that holds you back.
Yeah. Stacy, this has been a lot of fun. I want to ask you to end on this. I always like to challenge the audience with something. Maybe it's a step they could take right now, an action item, something they could do today or this week. Anything popping up in your head you might encourage them to do. And it could be around their brand or copywriting. It could be something totally different. Doesn't matter. Feel free, dealer's choice here. So what would you challenge them on, or give them an action item to help them start?
So I would say my answer a couple of weeks ago would have been very different than what it's going to be right now. That summit that I went to was literally life changing, and there were two things that I took away from that are going to move me forward in my business. I would recommend for anything else. And one thing is, when opportunity knocks, answer. Right? People are going to give you opportunities, and some of them are going to be really scary. Just do it. Take advantage of the opportunities that come your way. And the other thing that I took away from that was really profound for me is, right, your why has to be bigger than your excuses. So really take some time, especially when you're getting started, to figure out what's your why. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And what does that really mean for you? And I think once you know what your why is, the rest of it falls into place a lot easier.
Love that. What was the summit? You shot it out.
It was the Badass Business Summit.
Where was that located?
It was in Fort Worth, Texas,
Okay.
and it's through Success Champion Networking. It was really, I thought I was going to go and just get a few days of information, and I'm not kidding when I say it was a life-changing experience for almost every single person in that room.
Yeah, I know if now it rings a bell, because I know a few folks I follow on LinkedIn went to that. So I'll have to check that out now. Is it once a year they do it?
Once a year, so it'll be same time next year, mid-September.
Okay, awesome. Stacy, this has been a lot of fun. Where can I know probably LinkedIn's your answer, but where can folks say hello to you online? Where do you want to send them?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn. That's where I hang out most of the time. I generally post every day, but I'm always in there engaging. So happy to connect with people there for sure. And then my email list as well. I love having my email list, and I really consider my subscribers to be part of my community. I love hearing from them. So that's another great place to connect with me as well.
Awesome. Stacy, this is a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.